it's my responsibility to take care of those who are unclaimed or unidentified and unclaimed. Of course, the unidentified are John Does, and that's an old English term, and it comes from when landlords would want to eject somebody that were like squatters, and he didn't know their real names. So for the court procedure to go on, they would just call the person a John or a Jane Doe so that they could go ahead with the ejection of the not renter but squatter. So I thought that was interesting because when I was doing the chapter, I really didn't know where the term John Doe had come from. So it is this old English term, which we now today just, it's somebody we don't know their identity. You know, with us in the coroner and ME field, identity is a more rigorous process. In other words, you just can't take a driver's license on a person, and if you can't do visual identification, you can't rely on that. You have to say with reasonable medical certainty, this is who this person is. Now, if you can't identify them, or even as a backup, we do fingerprinting. And of course, nowadays, DNA, on all John Does, and everybody comes through our office, we do what they call a DNA card, which is a sample of blood is put on a blotter, and that DNA card is held with the file for as long as that file exists, and they exist for a very long time. That's very important because nowadays we're also doing DNA research with different causes of death, different people with socioeconomic backgrounds or opioid addiction and things like that. Sometimes we team up with clinical organizations to try to look for maybe commonalities or the addiction gene, that type of thing. So that data is all important. Everything the dead tell us is important. It tells us how they died, but how we should live. So what do all these homeless people tell us? You know what they tell us? They tell us that Western civilization is breaking down, that we don't have the family cohesion we used to have. They also tell us that relationships are more superficial than they used to be. Community is not as strong. Every ME in coroner's office, not just in the state of Pennsylvania, but across the United States, has an ever-increasing job of taking care of the unclaimed and the unidentified because of this increase in homeless population. The reason I wrote this chapter, or am writing this chapter, on homeless is very simple. They are people. They have a body, they have a mind, they have a spirit, and they had a life prior to being homeless. And they had reasons, and they've had stories to tell when being homeless. Of course, they can't tell me those stories, but many times their body, the patterns, the way they died can tell me an awful lot. I'm no different than you. When you're walking along the street, you don't really want to introduce yourself to the homeless. You don't really want to look there, and you sometimes feel like, well, it's their lack of moral behavior that possibly brought them to where they are. But that's not always the case. Some of these stories are phenomenal. In the book, I'm going to tell two of those phenomenal stories. One phenomenal because of the very talents of the man, and the other because how hard and harsh this decline in family and community has impacted individuals. There are many forgotten people today, and it's mainly because we become more involved with materialism, power, entertainment, lack of self-responsibility. All these things have caused this massive population that's out there. Were it not for the coroners and the MEs, these bodies would be laying in the streets and the alleys of major cities, never to be picked up, or if picked up, it would almost be like a garbage collection. Each one of these offices try to handle this task as appropriately as we can. But even here in Dauphin County, it's a potter's grave, it's an unmarked grave, and we have to use a mass grave at the end of the year where we bury a group of cremains. The real tombstone at this point, the one that could be read in the future, are those little DNA cards that are in their files. Some of them reopen after years and years because we get new information. And at least we can tell the story of how they died. And we do have that Potter field. There's only one marker that really stands upright, and it's in memory of all those who had died and are interred there. It's a problem. It's one we don't like to face, but it certainly is one we should talk about and also attack. We have to look at this massive population that can no longer function in this society and has been relegated to homelessness, either because of their own behaviors or because of our lack of concern. So that's just one more of these patterns on the body that I thought here on this Sunday evening as I sit in my own office and look at the sunset after contemplating for part of the day on what I'm going to say about the homeless. Thought I'd share it with you. If you like these tidbits and if you want to follow more of my commentary on what I see in studying the death and the dying, and also some of my discussion from the other side of me, which is thantology, or the study of death and dying, where I talk about grief and recovery, I'm going to be starting a lecture series. It will be about 3 parts. It'll be filmed down at Harrisburg University, and then from there, I'm most likely it'll be simulcast on Facebook and YouTube. So again, be sure to subscribe and push the button for the bell down below so that when I post, you know that there's a new post up.